the differences. And now here we sit 6 years later, there's still nothing. Doesn't stop them from continuing the nonsense. We have the hostage rescue team raiding our house. It sort of never ends.
Don, what's up?
What's going on, man? How you doing? Good to be here.
Good to have you on the show. A little clink.
Yeah, a little clink. I was just giving you a hard time about this is the worst merchandising opportunity in the world. I want to get some crayons and just write, BRCC on my paper cup, but the coffee is phenomenal.
Man, it is good. That is actually, that's one of my more favorite cups. I've been drinking light coffees forever. And every now and again, I'll pop a dark coffee in the exclusive coffee subscription. And I've been drinking it for the last several days because it just came out. Yeah. And I'm fairly in love with it.
Well, I've learned a lot about coffee from you. And I actually didn't start drinking coffee till 5 years ago. Seriously? 6 years ago, yeah. I actually, growing up, and my mom's Eastern European. I could eat anything, organ meat, no problem. I did not like coffee, and I did not like celery. Literally the only two things I couldn't eat. So I couldn't eat coffee, ice cream. No. Still, celery's now the only one.
Right.
And it was weird on the campaign trail in 15 and 16. I do drink more caffeine than any human being alive, enough to kill a horse, 1,500 milligrams a day kind of thing.
It feels good.
Whatever it is, it's now I can do that, and I can pound an energy drink and go to sleep. I probably got to wean off of it so I actually get some effect, but now it's just almost like a mental crutch. But on the trail, no one, the only thing that was always present that had caffeine was coffee. And so I started almost the first couple times, reluctantly, and literally whatever it was clicked in my brain and was yep, good. And I've been drinking, again, way too much probably ever since.
I've been drinking it since I was 12.
Yeah.
Right. So I've just grown up around it. It's always strange for me, especially in Utah. I always run into people that are I don't drink coffee. And obviously because of the LDS population here, they don't drink coffee. But it's always weird for me to find those people that don't drink coffee. I'm always why? Why do you not drink it? I'm super interested.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I don't like the taste. I'm that's crazy. It tastes amazing.
Yeah, well, I was that guy, and I don't know many people that sort of discovered it later. It's some of my kids love it early, and then some don't like it at all. And but yeah, no, I figured it out later. But hanging out with you guys, I've seen just the full nerd effect of how far you can go down the rabbit hole, and it's actually pretty impressive. But I'll say this, as the guy that was drinking crappy coffee on the back of some stage somewhere, having you do the full thing when you do, weighing everything, it's you taste it, you're oh wow, there really is a difference. It's not all the same. It's not just a caffeine delivery system like that. I appreciate it so much more having seen that. And now even at home by myself, not often, but on the weekends or something like that, when I know I'm not rushing somewhere, I'm taking the time to actually do it right. And it makes a big difference. I sit down there and I actually enjoy it that way.
I've learned how to make it on the road too. I think I was telling you in the Trump down in Vegas, I was making coffee out of a pour over. Jamie?
Oh, thank you. Well, let's see. Okay.
Branding opportunity.
Well, I mean, that's honestly,
I like subtle branding opportunities.
Yeah, I'm a Trump. We don't do subtle branding opportunities. I don't even understand. Why would you do that to yourself? I mean, that's bullshit. Okay, fine.
Hilarious.
I'm gonna go along with this.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite mug. So I designed this mug as my favorite mug. So years ago, this was 6-7 years ago. Volume, clarity. So when I look at what makes a great mug, it's size obviously matters, but it's color too, because I can see from a lighter cup, I can see down through the edge, and I can see if it's a dark or light roasted coffee. It's got this little thumb thing.
Yeah, I like it's
it's a
grip.
Yeah, it's the perfect mug.
Yeah,
I designed it years ago.
It feels like your handgun that you did the custom striations on it. You know what I mean? It just. Yeah.
I love this mug, and I'm not missing a branding opportunity. I designed it years ago with one of my buddies' mom. She was a master ceramicist or whatever the heck they're called, and they're she threw this thing, and it was called the handmade mug, and Shout out to Rory because he is a great guy. He's a helicopter pilot here locally, and his mom made these mugs, and they're fucking
cool.
awesome. And so it's called the Judy mug or the handmade mug or whatever the heck we were calling it. And we spent months trying to unfuck what I thought was like the perfect mug, and then that's what we came up with. And then finally, I've got it back. They've been out of stock for years because I haven't been able to find the right person to make it. So I just let's move on.
Very nice,
man. It was good to hang out yesterday.
Yeah, I had a great time.
Yeah.
Hey, dude, I love the operation here. Just like the workplace environment. It's so, it's so different from like so many places we come from, like the desk job side of stuff. Like there's like you guys have figured out like that great like work-life balance, even at work, it seems. You know what I mean? Like everyone's having a good time. It's a chill, relaxed environment. You get the archery range and like the knife forge. I'm like, what, like, like it's, yeah. I was like, man, I needed that. Like at Trump Org in New York back in the day, it was just a little different, but like you've evolved in, what can be, these days at a company. So I thought it was really cool.
People always like, they come here and they're blown away because we've got Grizzly Forge, which is Lucas. Yeah. He's here on premise and he's making knives. Then we got a gym. We've got an archery range. We've got a full-time BOTAC, which is Isaac Jr. and Isaac Sr., which they worked for like Easton and Hoyt for a long period of time. And they're always kind of like blown away by the fact, one, we make a bunch of shit. Like we print all of our own shirts and we roast coffee.
That's what surprised me the most, actually, right? Because I mean, these days you get so jaded. So many guys out there, it's literally a marketing operation with everything else subbed out, right? OEM this, it's all like, like, this is where we print and sell, 500,000 shirts. I'm like, what? You do that here? You're actually making something? You're roasting your own and I've known you for, I like 6, 7 years. My coffee journey basically started about the same time. Like that's around that time I started even drinking coffee, and you guys were just at one of the little shows somewhere, and we started hanging out a little bit. And so, but even still, even knowing you, it's like you still sort of assume these days, like no one makes anything in America anymore. Like unfortunately, right? We're talking about sort of like, the reason the Trump hat was like the trucker hat, and is because it was literally the only hat company in America that did like a brimmed hat, and you couldn't do it. And we weren't going to, sub that out to China. Other people, knock it off, and it was like, okay, free advertising. We're not going to necessarily go after their IP, right? But like, when we were the ones that were official, it was one company in America that did it. So you get so jaded just assuming that it almost can't be done. So watching you guys do that, honestly, I think you almost have to tell that story more, because if I didn't know it, I imagine most don't. And seeing it here and just watching it through the process, it's pretty amazing. And it's awesome to see. Like, we need more of that.
We do. And I think like I've taken that on as like part of the charter of the company in the context of I purposely don't outsource things because I want to hire people. I want to build a culture. I want to build what I call an ecosystem here at the company, which allows people from typically, we'll say a military background or a blue collar background where they have a non-corporate environment where they can come in and they're conforming, where they can say the F word. It's okay. Like it doesn't offend me, and it doesn't offend anybody else. I hope, but ultimately,
if it does, they're probably not going to last all that long.
If it does, move on. And like for the longest time, because people always ask me, like, why are you printing your own shirts? Like, it'd be easier for you to outsource it. I'm like, because I like employing people. I want to bring people in. I want to give them, a fair compensation, and then build this company around how interesting and cool people are. Like, you were talking to Amanda yesterday, and she's been with the company for 4 years. Started in the print shop, worked her way up. Just graduated from a project management course, and now, she went on a bear hunt with the company a couple months ago, killed a black bear up in, BC with the rivets, which I'm sure you're familiar with them. And that's the kind of shit that I'm into. Yeah. It's like,
well, but even the story of like how you started with the shirts, it's like you were down in Vegas and you saw the machinery, and like you just like you show up and like, hey, like we're now doing this here.
We're like,
here's the equipment. Like, we're going to figure it out. Like, that's cool. Like, that's sort of, again, that American ingenuity that used to be there, the entrepreneurialism, that's like, you're just doing it. And I know I found it really fascinating. And again, it's something that most wouldn't know. And I think these days, again, everyone's so sort of jaded. It's like,
Right.
everyone slaps their patch on something and it's outsourced by someone else. And ultimately it all leads back to China. And like,
Right.
it's cool to see the opposite.
Well, no, and people will always be a little bit surprised because there are things that we have to outsource, right? There are things that
you physically cannot do it anymore. It's like,
and we'll have like, I'll take the outsourcing out of just even putting a patch on a hat, for instance. So then the Afghans that I worked with in Kabul, they're working in the sew shop and they're
I saw them down there.
they're stitching it's awesome.
Yeah.
And they love their job.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a guy that likes to hire people and build company stuff, I would love to be able to have all of it, just all of it. Just, cut and sew for any and all things, reams of plastic so I could make my own bags. Like I love the manufacturing piece and people don't understand.
You guys are much more of a manufacturer than anyone would ever actually sort of give you credit for or be able to see within the realities of sort of what is American manufacturing these days, right? So it's, I was really impressed with that. It was really cool to see.
Well, and so many people, and I think even for us, we get consumed with trying to make really cool videos, right? We want to make these really cool videos because it's like part of this entertainment piece and it's super fun. And then you forget, man, the blocking and tackling, the stuff that like literally scores the points, it's happening right here every day. Yeah. So right below us in the podcast studio is the t-shirt printing and then obviously some coffee roasting. And I walked you around yesterday and showed the history of the company. And we're not here to talk about my company though.
Well, hey, again, it's a fascinating story. Seeing it with my own eyes is amazing. Watching you go, full coffee nerd on some of the I'm just a curious guy. So learning about something I'd have and again, taking it that far down the rabbit holes, like, oh my God, you didn't realize there's that much sort of, that you can do with this thing.
And it's eye-opening.
We don't have time for all of it today, guys.
We don't have time for it.
That's a 12-part series.
Yeah, it's a 12-part series. We were out in Maine together just a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, whenever it was. Yeah. And we were hanging out with Tucker, which is he's an awesome guy.
Yeah.
Like, that dude is so much fun.
Yeah, great dude.
And talk about a guy that went down the rabbit hole on coffee because he completely went coffee nerd. Now he's like weighing his coffee and doing the whole thing, working with it.
I was watching that transformation. I'm like, oh boy, here we go.
Here we go. Because he is a details guy.
100%.
His brain works so much differently. And he's so fucking fascinated by, it seems like everything. He can get it. If people are into something, he's going to geek out.
Yeah, the whole even dynamic with you, once he saw your passion and getting it, like, it just, not that he wasn't open anyway, but like, it just sort of changed the mindset. But then he just, keyed in on everything and just, you could hear the questions rolling. And I was like, it was very cool.
Yeah. And
that was fun. That was a fun dinner.
It was a fun dinner. We shot skeet. You're phenomenal at shooting skeet. Well, and we weren't even like serious.
Yeah, I was shooting a side by side. There was a way too, like I'm long and lanky, so it's like I need a longer gun to shoot it well. But like, it was a cool place, just going up to a cabin with no electricity and like just an outhouse and like I want to go back there and spend like a week just fishing out of that cabin on that river, just like by myself. Like that's like my dream week,
Seriously, I couldn't believe how much of an outdoorsman.
Yeah,
like that was the one big surprise that I took away from that, which is he's a very accomplished outdoorsman.
Yeah, he's into it.
The outdoors, and I thought it was funny. He was telling us that story where Fox got him a front page for GQ or something. I was like, I don't want that. I want to be on the front page of Fly Tying Magazine.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's the one. Like that's more my speed.
That's more my speed. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is hilarious. One, he's hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he is.
Yeah, he's great.
He could be a comedian easily. I mean, in some ways he is because he roasts like.
Well, but you have to, like, honestly, I find that myself. They're like, Dylan, you're so funny. I was like, yeah, but like you're laughing because like the reality of the world in which we live right now at times feels like we're living a comedy. Like you can't make some of this crap up anymore. So to be able to, like, I find like using humor to sell it. I mean, even what I do with sort of the memes. You know, I joke, I'm general in the meme wars because honestly, like sometimes that picture does say 1,000 words and like you can communicate the idiocy of what's going on with the picture. That's sort of funny, but you're like, funny, but it hits home. It's kind of true right now.
It's true.
But that was a fun weekend.
You're a general in the meme war.
Yes.
I like that a lot. I really like that a lot. Yeah. And it's so funny because like I follow I follow you obviously, and I'm like, and I'll watch like the explosions, and it's funny to watch how people take their shit so serious, and you're like, man, this is a meme of like a puppet.
Yes.
And oh my gosh. You see like people's heads explode in the DMs or in the comments. You're like, what is wrong?
It's so funny. And then, and then of course, social does its thing. I go from like 300,000 likes opposed to like 5. And it's like, they're like, I guess they didn't like that last one. Now I'm in IG jail for the next, couple of weeks. And it's crazy.
When you think back from your entire, life cycle in this, as far as like was your dad talking about running for president like well before this? Was it something that was like always kind of discussed amongst the family?
Listen, it's still my dad, right? So discussed amongst the family is like, okay, I'm going to do this.
Right.
Like, you can partake or not, but like, we're doing this. So people always like, did he have a heart-to-heart with you guys to discuss the trials and tribulation? With him, the reality is what you see is what you get. But he'd been talking about it for a long time, actually. I mean, even in the 90s, he was talking about it. And back then it was like, Japan is taking our jobs. They were like, he's been remarkably consistent. Like you can go back and watch like Oprah episodes from the 80s where he's literally talking about the same things. And I think, finally, I guess he sort of accomplished enough in life. He's like, okay, like I just got to actually do something about it. And it's, sort of awesome. I think we all sort of have to have that call to action at some point in time in our lives. I always say, for me, like I've gotten really political. I spend a lot of time on it. I'm out there doing it. I got 5 young kids and I want them to grow up in a country that like we would recognize and appreciate. And it's like, I'm concerned that may not actually happen if we don't. For me, sort of that political journey is, vicious as it was with like, 50 hours of testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee. I understand that I am not of the moral character of Hunter Biden.
Right.
So they got to look at me much more with much more scrutiny in these things. But like, I had the head of the House Intelligence Committee saying he wanted to try me for treason, like a crime punishable by death. Like, for better or worse, I guess maybe I have a little bit of that Trump gene, which is like, okay, like we're going to fight now, so let's fight.
Right.
And I think it was really important. What was interesting, I said when my father, he had made up his mind, but even like before the infamous escalator ride down to make the announcement, I was like 50-50. Like, if you asked me like a week before, I'm like, I don't know. Like, really? Like, you sure? Like, I literally had no idea if it was going to happen. When I knew it was going to happen, we get in that elevator. Before the escalator ride, went down as a family. He just looks at me and goes, now we find out who our real friends are. And I'm like, oh man, that was real. It was kind of cool because it showed 2 things. It showed, A, he knew what was about to happen.
Right.
Like just how vicious, all the celebrity friends that, Trump's terrible. I'm like, that's weird. We had dinner 2 weeks ago. Like, he's terrible. Like, didn't stop you from coming over to our house for vacation. Like, and that happened a lot. It showed he was, understood how the real world actually works. And I think these days, so many people are living in, an imaginary, unicorn land that doesn't actually exist, but they'd like it to believe that it does. And it's sort of hard to operate when you're so detached from reality. He knew what was going to happen, but more importantly, he knew what was going to happen and he did it anyway. And I was like, that was his way of stepping up after years of sort of being like, these people are incompetent. They're destroying our middle class. They're doing this. And it was sort of, interesting watching a guy like that. Again, billionaire from Manhattan. Like, he understood, sort of the plight of blue collar America better than like those people in Congress who live in those neighborhoods who are supposed to be representing them that somehow didn't get it. So it was a pretty fascinating process, and it was awesome to go through.
Were you political moving into the the election? Were you, or I should say, were you involved in politics? Were you following it? Were you, or was this more of?
Honestly, not that much. Only because, listen, I was always a conservative, right? I was always big 2A guy, big in some of those issues. less so on the social side of, things because it just sort of didn't affect me. So I didn't really think about it. So I was always a conservative, but we were also, building buildings in New York City and in Chicago. And so you literally have to play both sides. The first fundraiser I ever did politically was for Andrew Cuomo. Right? No, but people are like, oh, well, that's crazy. Well, no, he was the Attorney General of New York. If you build a building, you put together an offering plan, the prospectus. The Attorney General of New York signs off on that to make you go forward. We would never get one through the Attorney General's office now. They've been trying to investigate us for, now a decade practically.
Right.
We'd never get it done. So you play it. That's what was kind of awesome with my father when they're like, what, you donated to Hillary? It's like, yeah, because I understand how this game works.
Right.
I know better than anyone, how this system works. And so, yeah, people are always like, what do you mean you did that? I was like, yeah, that's literally part of my day job, at the time. And so what was interesting for politics for me being where I'm from is it was actually really cathartic because now I can go do the things that I'm into.
Right.
Before it was I was sort of putting on a suit and showing up to a boardroom in New York City. I may have, spent the weekend at my cabin with, I didn't spend a weekend in New York in probably a decade in the city, meaning I'd go up to my cabin, I'd be fly fishing, I'd be shooting, I'd be hunting. And it's I felt like every day I was putting on a suit, I was faking it. Politics, as vicious, as brutal as it was, as much as they, tried and continued to try to sort of destroy me and my family, it was I was oh, it was actually, I found a sort of freedom at 38, started almost, anew, which is not something a lot of people sort of have that opportunity to do, where, again, it was very different than that business. So for me, again, as vicious as it was, I was like, this is great. And, just went from there.
I've often thought about, the politics just in general and then being thrown into the arena. So you're a relatively public but private person prior to that point. But now you're not only public, it's so public.
Yeah.
And it's across every media outlet. And then it's misrepresentation after misrepresentation. And then sometimes people get it right. Did it ever shock you to a point where you're like, what the fuck? Or was it something that you kind of built into?
Listen, it was pretty quick where, but it was interesting. They were like, well, his opening speech was, no. No one had a problem with it for 2 weeks.
Right.
Well, that's what people don't understand. They're like, oh, he said this about, well, you mean, you say, so there's not rapists coming across the border in Mexico? There's, it's pretty known. What was it? 1 in 3 women and children are, sexually assaulted. You're saying there's not a drug problem coming across these things? No one actually had a problem with it, the day of. It was when he started making traction. They're like, oh man, he actually may be the guy.
Right.
That's when it became a problem. And so, I sort of recognize that we just don't get to play by the same rules as the other side. The Democrats, they can take a negative and they have $1 trillion mainstream media complex, $1 trillion in social media companies, $1 trillion in big tech that will be like, okay, well, he screwed that up. So that'll never show up in Google search.
Right.
Or it's a bad message, but we'll say they really meant this way. They'll always get the benefit of the doubt. I'll never get the benefit of the doubt. So that was sort of shocking. I think over the last 5 years, perhaps, I always knew there was a left slant in the media, but now as someone who's been in the room, someone who was I was 3 of the big bombshells, but
yeah.
Oh my God, we got him now. Donald Trump Jr. It's no, I didn't. What do you, I was in the room. And I see the reporting as though it's the gospel.
Right.
And it's there's not even a pretense of objectivity. There's not even, it didn't matter. They found what they wanted to find. And we're not even going to check. We're just going to run with it. Then it becomes the story. The tweet goes viral. They leave it up. It doesn't matter. They'll do a correction on page 97 2 weeks later.
Right.
No one actually sees it. They still think the lie is the truth. I was in a tree stand one time. I was like, oh my God, we got Don Jr. in the, what? It was nonsense. But those stories are still up as though they're real.
Right.
And again, you then look at sort of the other side. It's, now and as we, literally as we speak, FBI is yeah, there's people saying that we were told to not look into the Hunter Biden laptop issue or to slow roll it or to get, you know what I mean? I'd never get that benefit of the doubt.
No.
If it was the Don Jr. laptop from hell, it would be a serious problem. And any one of the 200 degenerate things on there would be in and of itself disqualifying.
Right.
Let alone it's not a problem. I get that. We talked about my caffeine addiction. I'm a pretty amped up individual. It's when I'm amped up, they're like, oh my God, he's on cocaine. I'm like, but the guy that's like on video is smoking crack. Like that's no, that's an addiction problem. I'm like, wait a second, but you can't, like, come on. Like they go after me for calling that out after, I was like, I don't know, maybe I take it personally because you attacked me as this like degenerate human being for 6 years. None of that, it's all projection. It's like the stuff that they're doing, I don't know, it's Don Jr., he was doing that. He's the cokehead. It's like, dude, the guy's on video. Like, this is not like every time. Like, there's like, imagine like the stuff that Hunter Biden was like, you know what? I probably shouldn't record this one. Like, imagine what was.
Where's the line?
Yeah, what was too extreme? What was too extreme to put on video? Where he's like, you know what? Maybe like I shouldn't record this one. Like, because like we probably have seen like the good clips because there was probably stuff way worse than that. And it's like, and again, I just say like, and like. Even a leftist, if they're not totally, suffering from, Trump derangement syndrome, TDS for short, like even they'd be like, yeah, that's probably right.
Yeah.
But there are people that literally don't believe that. And that's, again, where we are. Like it's gone pretty insane.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me that people are so passionate about certain pieces of information that they cannot substantiate whatsoever. So like when you specifically were going through the Russian collusion thing, it's like Russia. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about it in the context of, you're giving congressional testimony. Yeah. There's so much information every day coming out on this and nothing happened.
Nothing. Well, and none of it was back. Like
none of it was
you have
factual.
The leader of the House Intelligence Committee say, like, I committed treason.
Yeah.
Like, again, a crime punishable by death. Like, but, so now there's nothing? It's like, we're just kidding.
We're just
like,
kidding.
there's no accountability for that. It's like, they can make you do this, they do that. Like, and try, like, in 50 hours of testimony, like, all they want is one little mistake.
Right.
Then they get you for perjury. And that's all it was from the beginning, right? But that doesn't stop them from going on TV every day and lying to them. We've seen the evidence. Really? Like, well, like, shouldn't we see it? Like, where is it? I'm still waiting. Right. You've seen the evidence? It's like, well, how about like we now know like who paid for these things and like, how that started. Like the guy that there was one of the biggest real estate developers in Russia. Like we were a real estate company.
Right.
Like I looked at doing deals there. I looked at a couple of deals with those guys. Like that's how business works. Like if you say, hey, could you meet with something, sure. Because like, who knows? Like at that point in time, we had, according to everyone in the world, we had zero chance of winning a primary, let alone the general election. It's like, well, I'm still going to be in the real estate business. Like you maintain relationships. That's what you do.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so there's nothing nefarious about it. But like, again, Hunter Biden can be taking, millions from the Ukraine for a no-show job in a business he's never been in, with no understanding of the language, $1 billion, China, they're not stupid. They probably do some due diligence before they just give a random crackhead $1 billion. Like I can, they're not going around handing out billions of dollars in investment to someone unless they're buying them.
Right.
Which of course they were, but that's not a problem. No, he's a private citizen. It's like, I wasn't a private citizen.
Right.
Well, you're political. Well, I don't have a choice. You've come at me and attacked me. Like at this point, like I'm just in the fight and I'm willing to do that. So, the way they can try to rationalize, the differences. And now here we sit 6 years later, there's still nothing. It doesn't stop them from continuing the nonsense. We have the hostage rescue team raiding our house. Like it sort of never ends. And I'm like, but it's weird. Ends. Like they never look.
Well, that was the one thing that thinking back on that time, which was why, if the other side is willing to do these types of things, so what's wrong with the Republican Party at this point? Like, so from your perspective, when you look at the Republican Party, what's wrong with it?
Yeah, listen, I think it was, it certainly explains, I think, the rise of Trump. And honestly, it probably explains a lot of me. There's the people like, hey, when are you running? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you want me to run? Like, I don't have the hubris or the ego to be like, I should be doing those things. But like, there's polling that has me. If it's not DJT, I'm a top 2 or 3 candidate for 2024. I'm like, what I literally figured out was it's like, they're just like, he's crazy enough to actually fight.
Right.
Like he'll actually get in the mix and not just fold. And I think that's the difference. What's wrong with the Republican Party is it's an easy existence in Washington, D.C. if you're a Republican, if they know that you'll give up when it matters. Hey, Second Amendment, well, we'll fold and we'll give you this. It's like, okay, fine. We'll leave you alone. Like, we'll invite you to the cool person party. And for so long, these guys have just, it's just easier to be left alone. And I asked, it was when I asked Matt Gaetz about this, obviously a firebrand and wild man, and like, but great, but he's a fighter. I was like, well, dude, why doesn't that guy fight? Like, I think he believes, like, I hear his stump speech in front of 10 people and he's talking about all these things that he's going to do. But when he goes to DC, he goes, well, that guy, he sat on the city council for 7 years in a job. And then he got up to the state legislature and he was making $3 a month. And like, it's sort of like, Eddie Murphy and the Distinguished Gentleman, right? He had the same name of the guy that had the congressional seat for 30 years. And like, that guy died. And now it's like the name you know. Now he's a congressman. And he will do anything to stay there. He's in the big leagues. Someone's kissing his ass every once in a while. He gets to go do this. Like, he's never going to jeopardize that. And again, if you're on the left, like, you get every benefit of the doubt, right? They can come up with the dumbest. I mean, I'm watching the left have, sound bites where they're, well, no, that's not a pedophile. It's a minor attracted person. Like, that's totally, like, that's a new sexuality. That's totally fine. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, seriously, like, and like, I look at the hills the left is dying on. And it's like, if we took a comparable insane idea on the other side, it would just be barrage, cancellation. It's over, and so the problem with the Republican Party is they have not had the balls to actually fight. They want that easy existence. And again, it's an easy existence if you're weak. You can vote Republican 95% of the time when it doesn't matter. But when it's those margin votes and they really want it and they really need it, and they know you're going to fold, they'll leave you alone. And I think, we've been playing a different game for far too long. The Republicans have been playing T-ball while the left has been playing hardball.
Right.
And like, that's not a recipe for success in the long run, right? We're like, oh, well, we'll turn the other cheek and we'll do this while they're laughing their ass off, taking every win, owning every institution, from academia to even the, the at least the upper echelons in the bureaucracy of the military and law enforcement. I mean, look at the FBI. It's like, and I always make the distinction between the door kickers because I know those guys are on our side because they tell me that, but they're like, well, we don't have a choice. This is where it's coming from. It's a shame what's happened to, I hear that every day. I'm like, guys, like, eventually you're going to have to do something about it because, you see that, the weaponization of that. You've watched it. I talked about, them raiding Mar-a-Lago. Like, fine, like, but there's communications back and forth where everyone's cooperating. Like, you needed to go in with the HRT, the hostage rescue team. Like, I don't even think they did like domestic, search warrants. Like, these guys go kill terrorists who hijack planes internationally. Like, I don't even know if that's been done on domestic soil. And yet, like, you're telling me that's not sending a message? And then when we question it and they say, well, we don't want your lawyers present. I'm like, why wouldn't you want, like, because if I'm exercising a search warrant, like, I want legitimacy to that, right? Like, well, and then you say, well, what the hell were they doing that they didn't want the lawyers there and they want to turn off the closed circuit cameras and stuff like that? It's like, well, how dare you question their integrity? It's like, well, how dare I? Like, I don't know. I'm watching guys from the FBI, whether it's Chris Wray or, Strzok or they lied before Congress. No consequence. Right. If I lied before, if I made a mistake, in my 50 hours of testimony, if I said, well, yeah, at 12:02, no, 12:03, like, jail. You get the Steve Bannon treatment. Right. If you're on our side. If their side, it's like you get a contributorship at CNN. You're on TV and, I'm watching guys that literally lied before Congress talk about integrity within the FBI. I'm like, how dare you question their integrity? And like, well, like, they're lying on FISA warrants. They're lying before Congress. They're setting up meth heads, creating a fake kidnap plot of Gretchen Whitmer right before an election. Like, we now know that, like, it was literally like, I don't know, you have a sophisticated organization throwing money at a bunch of meth heads to try to do, and they still, like, it's pretty clear that, like, they're like, no, we don't want to do that. Like, what are you talking about? No, that's what happened. Like, what have they done to deserve, sort of, to be above reproach? They certainly not from their actions. Like, they're lying to the American public. Like, every terrorist attack that's happened even in the last couple of months, like, he was on the FBI's radar. I'm like, well, why didn't they do something? Right. Well, he checked the box. Like, he was a trans unicorn. So we he may want to shoot up a school, but we can't look, that would be racist. That not woke enough. Like, this stuff's going on every day in America. It's really, scary shit. And so, we need to get guys that'll actually fight. And again, I think that's what was sort of the phenomenon of Trump is like, yep, that guy will fight for us.
Yeah.
And we don't have enough of that.
Well, I think one of the things that I've noticed is that every time you have a political issue that's either left or right, the opposite side will say, it's not okay to question the FBI or it's not okay to question the government. It's like, no, it's always okay to question the government.
Like our country is founded on
government. Like that's being a skeptic is perfectly fine. Not only fine, we should encourage that behavior.
Yeah.
When you look at the things that have happened in the last, what we'll call 100 years, and the complaints from both parties of like, overreach of government authority, whatever it might be, these are things that we always have to question.
Yeah.
When we look at the invasion of Iraq, and we were talking about this with Tucker when we were out there, which was, obviously I participated in Iraq for the majority.
Well, that was a fact,
like,
because I didn't even, hearing from your side of that was awesome, actually, because I didn't even put that together, and I was always a skeptic anyway, but that was awesome.
It was one of those things, if I could roll back the clock, and when we look at, 9/11, obviously it directly contributed to the global war on terror, and then Iraq, Saddam Hussein had fucking nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. If anything, he was fighting them in his own
Would we
country.
be better off if we,
And then you got, Colin Powell and the director of the CIA talking about ricin and chemical weapons, and it was all bullshit.
Yeah.
And people have such short-term memories where you're like, you have Colin Powell talking about...
And Dick Cheney. And now Liz Cheney, who was now she's a hero of the left because you'll stay, I'm like, come on.
They invaded a country.
Yeah.
Like they flipped it upside down and spent $1 trillion of the taxpayers' wealth. When you think about the largest single transference of taxpayer dollars in modern history was the global war on terror.
Yeah.
Even outside of the banking bailouts that Obama did. But when you think about the global war on terror and what it directly contributed to from the taxpayer dollars into the military-industrial complex, which, by the way, I'm not a fucking pacifist. Like, I believe in war. I believe in fucking killing bad people.
Yeah.
Not only do I believe in it, I think it should be encouraged.
Yeah, but there's ways to do it, right? Like, my father was that way. Like, he was like, and we had sort of the conversation even last night with friends who were operators, and it was like, dude, when he got in, he was just like, let the guys on the ground that actually know what they're talking about, like, let them take care of the bad guys.
Right.
And like, it was really successful, really quickly. And before that you had sort of we have a high value target. We got to call into Washington, D.C., minor difference of 12-hour difference. So the other guy's sleeping comfortably in his nice air conditioned bed. And it's like, well, I'll get to you when I get to the office. And by the time that happens, there's a change in the scenario. You miss the opportunity. There's children in the area. You now can't call in a strike. And it was like, it's not that hard.
It's not.
But we've made everything so insane. You see it going on today. I mean, today when I'm like, so why are we sending $60 billion to Ukraine?
Right.
It's not like it's not I think in many places they actually rate it like more corrupt than Russia. That's hard to believe. But it's just a kickback to big war. They're like, dude, we watched Big Pharma get rich for the last 2 years during COVID. Like, bullshit. Like,
where's my
money? And that's all it is. Like, it's literally just a kickback to big war. Like, but if you question, why are we sending... and we can all agree it's an atrocity and it shouldn't have happened and they're like, yada, yada, yada. But like, why are we sending, are you a Russia apologist?
Right.
It's like, no, dude, I just want to know where $60 billion, you guys throw around $60 billion like we're handing out like Oprah, like, you get $60 billion, you get $60 billion, and here's another $60 billion. Like, what about like the people who end up having to pay for this stuff?
Yeah.
Like the American taxpayer, like it's a government funded program. I'm like, bullshit. It's like a taxpayer funded program. Like there is no government money. Like it's all taxpayers. And like, you can't even question this stuff anymore. And that can't be.
But it doesn't make any sense. When you think about the left was questioning the global war on terror until Obama was elected. And then it was,
wow, look at what he's doing.
Look at what he's doing to fight. So it's like, 2 terms of the Bush administration, and they were, out protesting the global war on terror, talking about the atrocities of the American government in all these different countries. Then Obama's elected. And they're
it's
like,
okay now.
It's okay now.
It's okay now. Trump killed a terrorist? Like, oh my God. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I know we want to kill the terrorist. I'm like, I'm confused.
And then they go through 8 years of the global war on terror with Obama. And, to be fair, like, some of the left was like, hey, I'm not into this. Like, they stay true.
And plenty on the right were also like, what are we doing? Like, what's the end game? How are we going to...
Trump comes in and says, we're done with this, or whatever it is. We're going to change it around. We're going to take out Al-Qaeda. And now people don't even know what to do, because on the left or the right, they're like, wait, are we anti-war or are we pro-war? I don't know what's going on.
Well, and that's the thing. Just depending on who's in power and who the narrative benefits, it's a different answer.
It's a different answer.
The media, if the Democrats are doing, look, what a great hero you are for doing this, and if you're the opposite, and that's what's sort of the shame. It's like the perspective is just totally a loss at this point. Like, no one knows, and I mean, you know this stuff better than anyone. You spend so much time there. It's like this stuff's not that simple, but that you can sort of have a different result and a different, press story or headline just depending on who's the person, just because they're moving a political football as opposed to actually doing what's right. Like, it's pretty scary.
Well, that's the thing that's not only surprised me, but obviously I think the curtain's been pulled back on this is politics. It's not policy. So when you look at like strategic policy, strategic objectives, what's doing best for the country, I don't see that on either side. I don't see a lot of that. I see a lot of people that are, hey, this is me, not team. This is for me. This is for my career. This is for my progression. I don't see people saying, this is for the strategic best interest of the country. So when we think about like the Ukraine is a great example. When people are debating it, like give me a clear, concise strategic objective directly related to the Ukraine and what my dollars are going to be spent on. And then what are our minimum success criteria for withdrawal? So anything that we do and we're spending taxpayer dollars or blood and treasure, there should be at least the minimum success criteria for how are we going to get the fuck out? Yeah. Not because
but they don't care. That's the problem. Like, you saw like, all, the generals. And again, you're not allowed to critique a general because, they are above reproach. I'm like, I don't know that. Like they do this, then they end up, on the board of Raytheon. Yeah. Guess what? You know how they justify their, huge, board seat, comp is like by staying in wars, like by selling more missiles. Guess what? Like if you don't use the missiles, like, you're not making more money. Like it's one big, money laundering scheme, and that's the problem with all of DC and the swamp. It's that it's like, they are functioning for the benefit of themselves and their buddies, and everyone will get a kickback from someone else eventually, and they'll get hired for a board seat that they have no business being. And I mean, like, I always sort of use the example of like the withdrawal from Afghanistan. It's like, General Milley, he gets up. We could not have seen this coming. Like, really? You couldn't have seen it coming? Like, you've been in charge for 20 years. Like, and I'll caveat that I don't jack shit about Afghanistan. Like, I saw it coming. I was telling you last night, like my son, the day that was going on, he was watching the news. He's like, well, Dad, like, why would we leave $86 billion in military equipment? Like, I'm like, you're right, son. I too would love an Apache helicopter. Yeah. I have a problem when they're yelling at, Americans couldn't possibly have an AR-15, but you have no problem leaving 70,000 M4s, like fully automatic weapons. And I know they don't know the difference, but like we do. You don't have a problem leaving with the Taliban? Like, how many people, good, innocent people in Afghanistan, and you'll, again, know this better than me, will be maimed, killed, tortured with American military equipment for the next 2 decades that we just left there? Right. Like a lot. A lot. Like a humanitarian crisis, probably worse than what went on for the last 20 years. And they could not have seen it coming. No. Then the Secretary of State gets on stage. We are shocked and dismayed that the Taliban did not install a more diverse and inclusive government. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, seriously? No, like I feel like I'm being punked. Like, you're shocked and dismayed? Like, you may be dismayed, but you're shocked? Yeah. Like, did you think there was going to be like a huge, like, trans coalition, in the Taliban government? Like, I don't know. Like, for 20 years, you watched them throw gays off of buildings. Yeah, yeah. Like, you watched them put, like, a journalist in a cage, douse them in gasoline, and light them on fire. You would think the media would be like, these are not good people. But like, they're shocked that this didn't happen. Like, you thought there was going to, like, the women that they put and children that they put in sexual slavery for decades. Like, you think they were going to have a seat at the table? Like, they were going to negotiate on behalf, like, are you that stupid? Is any, like, are these, I was told the adults are back in charge now, but I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, they are so detached from reality, pushing these, like, woke hope notes. It's scary. That's like these are people that are making $1 trillion decisions for you, me, our children, our grandchildren after them. They don't have a bit, like, they shouldn't be running a kindergarten. No. I often find myself thinking about
how not only should they not be running a kindergarten, because actually that's probably...
they'll be indoctrinating our children with that bullshit too. And
They're barely capable of like turning the key in their car and turning it on and then like sustaining themselves. Like,
how does this work?
Like, how does this work? You can't change a tire. And I'm not saying that's the fundamental aspect of like life, but you don't have a concept of even how physics or the principles of those things work in momentum. And when I'm looking at it and you're hearing them talk, you have to understand they are dumb.
Yeah.
They're just like really fucking dumb. I've talked about this a lot with Afghanistan and Iraq. There was no context to understanding war. So when you had guys like Dick Cheney, when you had Don Rumsfeld, when you had, W talking about war, it's really easy to talk about fucking war when you have absolutely no reference points and you're looking at it from a document.
Yeah, and
Rumsfeld talked about how, which don't get me even started on these idiots. They were talking about, debathification. And one of the light bulbs that went on with me early on with these guys was how ridiculously articulate and at the same time, how fucking dumb they were. I was watching the news and they were talking about debathification in Iraq. And they're like, we need a debathification of Iraq. And we're in the country. We just popped this thing open and overthrew it. And I'm like, but the Ba'ath Party's been in charge for the entire existence, basically, for the last 40 years since Saddam has been in power. They have all their guns. Yeah. So you're now kicking out everybody that owns a gun, saying, go home, we don't want you, and basically fuck off. We were literally watching TV going, these guys are creating an insurgency. We're fucked.
And they did.
They did.
And they did.
Like, it was as if they were trying to create an insurgency so they would have a reason to spend more money. So when people are talking about...
But that's what it was. And like, there's no other... Now, in hindsight, like, name an other explanation. Other than, it was the military-industrial complex. This is a kickback to them. We'll come up with enough reasons for us to be there. Now that we're in, let's just keep it rolling. Everyone's going to make a lot of money. And like, when you look back, like, I can't find another logical reason. And you're like, it's terrible. They would never make decisions like that. I was like, wouldn't they? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't.
He's a bad guy. Like, hey, you know how many fucking bad guys there are in the world?
There's a lot of bad guys.
There's a lot of bad guys. Oh, he's a bad guy. I'll tell you what he wasn't. He wasn't supporting Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
Well, like they all fucking said he was. He wasn't. Yeah. He wasn't supporting Al-Qaeda. He wasn't supporting the global war, like the global war against America and a terror campaign against us. He wasn't doing that. You know why? Because Al-Qaeda would have destabilized his country.
Correct.
Because he wasn't.
That was Islamic the natural check and balance with Iran. That was the, again, I mean, you know much more about this than I do. I get criticized if I even comment on the military. I mean, I was trending on Twitter earlier this week. I woke up because I in a speech, and I've been saying this for like 3 years, so it's nothing new because I've had these conversations, and I know a lot of guys that are sort of operators and stuff like that. I don't pretend to be one myself. I shoot a lot, but it's not the same, and I'm not. But like, I can have conversations with people that are friends, and I had said, hey, I speak to guys on the teams, and like they're literally telling me that they have been doing and or speaking to their friends that are currently active, like they've spent more time doing, diversity and inclusion, education than they are shooting.
Right.
And I said it in a speech, and I've been saying it for years, but like he says that this is going on. He doesn't know anything. He probably doesn't know any of these people. So like, Rob O'Neill jumped in, Carl Hageby, a bunch of guys that I know, they're former SEALs. He's like, dude, he's 100% right. But I was trending on Twitter, trying to get like owned by the media that I couldn't possibly know. No. People in a pretty large community where I overlap a lot. I was like, I don't know. I hosted like the Navy SEAL Foundation, like big fundraiser this year. Like these are buddies. Like I know a lot of them. Like, of course I've had that conversation, and of course it's going on.
Right.
I was actually shocked when we were talking a little bit. I was like, I thought that was like a sort of a newer phenomenon, the woke training. Like I want my like SEALs like to go kill bad guys. Like
that's your job.
I don't care if everyone they work with is green or, female. If they're the best killers, like, go kill bad guys. And you sort of told me your story about, like, being called back into Kabul from the front lines in, like, really dangerous times to be like, now you have to learn about talking to females in the workplace, Evan. And you're like, there's no females in my workplace for a week. And I'm like, that was like the worst time spent ever for, by, again, probably a militant female who, will be an admiral or a general for no other reason other than they're probably female. And again, I'll get canceled for saying that, but like, I have a feeling if you're joining the military these days, like, if you check those boxes, if you could say, hey, I'm trans, like general, like you'll be so they can say they're doing it. And like, and it's insane. And like, so they were trying to literally like cancel me, and I'm trending on Twitter for saying something that is literally common knowledge. Like they are talking about like not being able to have retention in the military. They're talking about grossly missing their recruitment numbers because and again, another thing I'll get in trouble for, but like what patriotic American who would actually go and fight for our country that we'd want fighting for our country today would look at it and be like, yeah, I want to sign up for that, knowing they're going to enter this woke hellhole. It's sort of like police officers today. Like, you're going to go in and sign up to be a cop. They got rid of qualified immunity. So like, if some guy with a 30-page rap sheet breaks free, and I've seen, cop tells me, these stories all the time, like they break free, they smash their face on a wall, and then they try to claim police brutality. Like, so you're going to sue that guy personally? Like, why would you do that job? How can you do that job? Like, of course they're missing their recruitment numbers. Who's going to sign up knowing that they're going to be subjected to that shit, day in and day out? And of course it's happening. And then, again, the stories of like all the people being like, no, I'm a SEAL. I've had that conversation with Don Jr. and he's 100% right. Like, it just disappears.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, we'll change the narrative. We thought we had him. Like, again.
Well, there's always a gotcha moment, right? It's like there's a gotcha moment every week. We got you finally, Don. We got you, Don. And I'm like, I've seen this now for how many years? Where it's like, oh, we got you now. Like this is, and they don't.
Yeah. Well, I would say now the difference between sort of a conspiracy theory and the truth is about 6 months. Like the CDC owns all your quote unquote conspiracy theorist friends a major apology, because it seems like the guidelines that they come up with is what guys like me have been saying for 2 years. I'm like, I don't know. Like, it seems like, natural immunity would be a thing. Like, that's sort of how your body works. And, God forbid. Like, I mean, I used to get canceled all the time for talking about like the Wuhan lab leak theory. I'm like, they're like, how dare you? What do you know about this? I was like, I don't know. I'm just a thinking person. Like, you're telling me that the disease originated from 6 feet outside of the lab that studies the exact virus in question in the town where we're fine. You're telling me it came from the wet market like a block away.
Yeah.
But there's no way it originated in the place that they store the stuff. And it's like, I'm like, but if you're a medical professional and you said that, like, hey, there's a good chance you were done. You were literally thrown out.
Done.
Like, you were done as a medical professional, and they all knew it. And like, because of course they knew it. Because at what logical point in time was that ever not the most plausible answer? You know what I mean? Like, but they, like, you'd have to be an idiot to think otherwise. And yet, like, that was the gospel, and that's the way to hurt Trump. And, so I'm so used to this, like, they've got me once again. He's up against. I love when they do the compilation of the walls are closing in. The walls have, the walls have been closing. Give me a break already. Like, like enough. Like, please take the L. Just move on. Like, but it won't stop.
It will never stop.
No.
Like, that's the thing that I've realized, which I think is actually, it's probably healthy for our society just in general, is we have you specifically and your family, they've exposed the ridiculousness of the facade of the game, where if you're thinking and you're watching and you're looking at everything, you don't have to go to some obscure news network or log into somebody's blog or get into a Reddit stream. You can just watch.
Yeah.
You can just watch.
You know what's going to happen because
okay.
It's just like common sense is just totally missing, in the equation anymore. So like I always say, sort of what's good about what's going on right now is they're so desperately trying to do this stuff, right? You see it, like there's that, even those who've been sort of politically agnostic, the people who've sat on the sidelines, they're busy. I get it. They're trying to feed their families. They're trying to, raise some children. They're trying to live their American dream, what's left of it that we haven't exported to China. Like, they're doing that. But like, now it's so ridiculous that they're like, okay, yeah, like, wait a minute. Like, I'm the son of a billionaire. Like, if I'm pissed off filling up my truck, the average American is pissed off filling up his truck.
Yes.
Like, if I notice it when I go shopping, whether it's inflation or otherwise, like other people are noticing it. And then you have sort of the patronizing, nonsense. Remember like last year at 4th of July, it's like, you saved 16 cents on your 4th of July barbecue. Remember that one? I'm like, wait, but like if you got in your car and drove like half a block, like you burned up that 16 cents. So they found a basket of goods to sell a narrative. And then you ungrateful peasants you better be grateful of this. Now that same basket of goods a year later, this last 4th of July was $10 more expensive. And it's like, I don't know, well, we had nothing to do with that.
No.
You save 60, gas prices, right? They're double, but they went down 13 cents last week. The president has nothing to do with gas prices when they double, even though it's clearly based on his energy policies and shutting down pipelines and the environmental bullshit. But like, look what we saved you, 13 cents down. I'm like, wait, it's still like 100% more than it was. Like, what do you, like, what, how are you like?
The national gas price, it's like $10 or something, right? It went up exponentially. And there's no president in the history of the United States, modern history, when gas prices are up, they will not be reelected. Period. Yeah. It's directly trending. If you're up, you're out.
But you have so much working against you now. The other side has been so mobilized again with media and this.
Oh my God!
They're trying to sell you this narrative. Like, no, it's wonderful. Inflation.
It's narrative.
It's transitory. It's a good thing. You had Paul Krugman, the Nobel laureate in economics, telling you that. Well, there's no real evidence that the lowest income earners are most affected by inflation. I'm like, wait, I have an economics degree from Wharton. I'm not a PhD, but I'm like, please, explain this. Cause I think I could have this debate with Paul Krugman and destroy him.
There's no evidence that the lowest wage workers are not affected.
He wrote it in the New York Times. So you're saying the guys with the least amount of income, the least disposable income, are not affected the most by price increases. Please explain to me how that person's not hit. And so they're constantly they will sell their souls to try to create, this narrative. You saw, this week we're dealing with it, right? You have, they're basically buying off their highly educated public. We're going to pay off your student loan debt. It's no, you're not paying off shit. Some plumber who said maybe 4-year degree and, $500,000 in debt to get a gender studies degree isn't for me. I'm going to go become a plumber. That plumber is helping to subsidize someone, who went to higher education that should be didn't think about maybe that was a worthless degree that was never going to pay it back. Or someone who saved and spent. We are rewarding the least responsible people in society. We are encouraging reckless behavior by rewarding just stuff that doesn't make any sense. And we're asking the hardest working people and the people who were most responsible to then be Lawrence Tribe, Harvard law professors, I'm really glad that thousands of the students that I work with are going to get some relief. I'm you mean thousands of Harvard law graduates? Yeah, they're going to get a bailout from Joe Plumber?
Yeah.
Some guy who, or some guy who went to law school and just hey, I'm not going to buy the cool fucking toy for, to show it off on Instagram or go on the badass vacation to get the, to get the selfie. I'm going to live responsibly and in my means, and I'm going to pay off my debts. That guy gets jack shit.
But
the person who lived most recklessly and, or chose a degree that had no, a 3-year-old can decide if they're a boy or a girl. And we can make permanent decisions to their body and inject themselves with hormones to irrecoverable stuff. If they ever change their mind when they're adults. But an 18-year-old is not capable of looking at a loan document and saying okay,
not capable.
Not capable. How do those two fact sets exist in the same reality?
It's exploitive. So, that's what they're talking about. Is how these loaning institutions are exploiting these 18-year-old kids that are going to college. Yeah. And so they're predatory loans. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, okay, when I was 18 years old, I was working on a farm and I had a night job. I was sorting packages at UPS. I was working on a farm to pay my way through college because I didn't want debt. So when I look at this, I say, to your point, Joe Plumber or, my dad was a welder and a logger and all these other guys that are now these guys are professionals.
You're paying for the most educated people in the country.
6 figures because these professions are also highly desirable now. And we don't have enough people filling those positions, but they're going to go subsidize the people that decided to take out $150,000 worth of debt to go get an English lit degree, which, by the way, I don't care what you fucking got, but don't make somebody else pay for it.
Yeah.
Because
by the way, do whatever you want, but like figure out, like, I don't care. You want to get a PhD in gender studies and underwater basket weaving?
Hey,
be my guest.
Awesome.
But like, don't come to me and be like, hey, I had no idea that we couldn't have paid this back. And that, that's happening far too much. The other aspect of that is like, I actually, one of the sort of things that I've gotten into these days as sort of we deal with cancel culture is like actually like publishing books, because like all of the big publishing houses are so left and so woke that like you couldn't go to them with a conservative book and where they would water. And I don't mean like radical shit. I mean like mainstream conservative thought. They're like, no, you can't say that. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, it's my book. Like, no. Well, we won't publish it. We won't. So I started publishing books. I helped Charlie Kirk from Turning Point USA. I helped him publish a book just now called The College Scam. And it talks about all that. Like this, 10 grand or 20 grand payment, like they're just going to jack up tuition. Harvard has a $43 billion endowment. They keep raising the price of tuition. The value of the degrees that most of these people getting is a continually depreciating asset. It's no different than what they did. Like, well, we're going to give you $7,500 tax credit if you buy an electric vehicle. Right. You can't afford $5 gas, but you should be able to go buy a $75,000 electric vehicle, because they can't figure out how that doesn't work either, right? But the second they announced that tax credit, literally all the electric car manufacturers just jacked their prices up by $7,500. You don't think that's going to happen in education? They have jacked up the prices for a depreciating asset, meaning the value of those degrees, because half of them are worth, you can go take a course in the fashion of Harry Styles. Like, great, but I don't know, probably not something you can ever monetize or like, but
how is that directly contributing to anybody's value in their life? That's the other thing, is like, if you're going to pay tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, where you don't have the foresight to look into the future and say, I will not be able to pay these things back. And the only way that I'll actually be able to pay them back is if I get a job at the university teaching the same bullshit.
How about we tax the endowments? I mean, Harvard's endowment's big enough. They could have everyone going there for free. But, they'll still jack up the money. You'll still get a loan. They'll raise tuition another 10 grand to make up for this, because now they know there's a guarantor on there. And no one on the left is ever going to take on someone in academia, because they've been on the same team indoctrinating our children for the last few decades. So it's like, just pass it on. Like, you think this is going to end well?
$43 billion.
$43 billion endowment. If you took... And
you could pay,
but the plumber now is going to take and they actually said it the other day. Well, how much is this going to cost? Like, we don't really know. I'm like, so you're just basically bribing like the leftists that had the ridiculous. You're basically bribing them to show up by saying, hey, we're going to give you 20 grand to vote for Joe Biden.
That's all it is.
Or a Democrat or something like that. That's all it is at this point. But they're like, well, we would never want to be irresponsible. Well, okay, so how much does it cost? Well, we don't know that. I'm like, wait, but you announced the thing yesterday. Like, you're doing this, but you don't actually even know how much, because it doesn't matter. Because they don't give a shit, because they're playing with they're playing with house money.
I like that. I like how you don't actually have to know. In the government, you actually don't have to know how much things cost to make decisions. Yeah. Wow, wouldn't that be great if I could sit here as the CEO of the company and be like, hey guys, we're just going to do this. Yeah. You know what? We're not going to model it out.
I want my mortgage to identify as a student loan, because it's like, I'd love to pay less. Like, why wouldn't I pay less? Like,
wouldn't it be great if business worked that way?
Yeah, it'd be nice.
Let's model it out. Let's just do it, guys.
Why don't you just say, you know what? You don't want to pay taxes. Just send them less. Yeah. Send them less. Be like, I'm going to write off 10 grand for like what I had spent on college. Like, I was blessed to have parents that were able to pay for my college. Like, I get it. I was very lucky that way. Like, I'm just going to take the write-off though anyway. Like, why shouldn't I get the same benefit? I mean, I went to college.
Yeah. You should.
Like, I paid for the insanity that's doing there, and I pay a lot in taxes.
Or maybe we should send, maybe I should send, and you should send, both of us should send invoices to the G for the $10,000 plus interest.
Yes.
Because we actually.
You're right. We should get some interest in it. I have a feeling that many of the 87,000 new armed IRS agents will show up at our door. I have a feeling they won't be politically aligned with us, and I don't think we'll get the benefit of the doubt.
I don't think so. Did you see that video of
it was so bad.
The IRS.
It was so bad.
Video.
I don't want, dude. I can't even.
I thought it was a joke.
I can't even say what I'm thinking about some of this stuff, because it's like, I'll go to hell. But like, I'm looking at him. I'm Jesus Christ. Like, but that's what's going to happen. Like, they're not going to find a guy that like you served with to be this agent. They're going to find a leftist. They're going to get, the only people in the world they want to have guns. Like, I love watching the left who spent the last 5 years like wanting to defund the police. They're like, no, we want the FBI and the IRS to have a lot of guns. Like, they're the only people in America that can have guns. Like, and that's totally great. Like,
it's defund the police, but let's fund the IRS and the FBI to the tune of
insane, insane. Like, it'll be the largest federal institute. Like,
people.
You need 87. Like, at this point, with all of the benefits of the left, there's probably not 87,000 taxpayers left in America because everyone can, it's insane.
I really like the contradictions and the hypocrisy because there's no way you can actually follow the conversation. The conversation of the national, like it's like talking to a fucking schizophrenic.
I have questions.
You're crazy.
It's like, what do you mean you have questions? Like, I'm like, well, because none of it actually like makes sense. Like, it's awesome. None of it adds up, and it doesn't have to.
No,
because they don't like. And that's the crazy thing. Like, we've created like the people who go into government are literally like the people that probably couldn't have made it anywhere else. It's like Anthony Fauci. Yeah. There's not a place in the world where Anthony Fauci was ever the best doctor.
No,
what he was the best bureaucrat. He learned how to manipulate the system, probably snake anyone that was a good doctor. And we know that because we know what he said on TV and we've read his emails. And the two are exactly the opposite. Like, he was good at, never met a camera he didn't love.
Yep.
He would get out there, great hero. I'm like, well, what? Like, he's been wrong since the 80s. Like, look at the video, like the AIDS epidemic and his response. Like, has he gotten one right? And yet, if you're the best bureaucrat, you will keep that job and you will rise to the top and you'll be the highest paid federal employment ever. And you can now retire in fear because you see the Republican. Well, I may not, if they subpoena me, I may not show up. Well, that's weird. If like Steve Bannon didn't show up, the FBI shows up at his house.
Right.
Roger Stone had a SWAT team come and arrest a 75-year-old dude that I don't know. Fauci, no, we're not going to touch him. He can just not show up. Because we're playing by different rules.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think like the only good thing of what's going on right now is it's so flagrant, it's so ridiculous that again, I think the people that have been sitting on the sidelines sort of not really paying attention almost don't have a choice anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. Like, people have to have like this conversation. People have to, whether you're on our side or the other side, like we have to have some common sense anymore because like it's just missing.
Yeah, common sense is what is it? Common sense is uncommon, right? That's a Mark
far
Twain.
from common.
I think it's like a Mark Twain quote. So we got to switch up. We got to talk about where are you going next for hunting?
Well, I just got back from Mongolia.
Mm-hmm.
I went out there with my son, and we sort of do an annual hunting trip, sort of living in a yurt,
right.
Land in Ulaanbaatar, drive 19 hours like off road, and pretty much as far as you can get.
Was this you and him?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And Jason from Field Ethos.
Yeah.
So that was awesome. This weekend, I'm just gonna.
What were you guys hunting out there?
We're like argali and ibex, that kind of the stuff that's over there, and it just awesome kind of cool mountain hunting, incredible country. Like,
how do you get your guns over there? Or are the guns already pre-positioned?
No, you know me. Like I'm so anal about my guns. Like I gotta bring my own because it's like you never know, and those kind of things. You travel that far, it's like I want to know that it's dialed and whatever. But no, you can do it. Actually, every country is different. It's like you have to go through a permitting process, and you have to do this, and you can only bring 30 rounds of ammo over and stuff like that. But no, it can be. It's not that complicated. It can be a pain in the ass. Honestly, it oftentimes depends on like where you fly through. Like even like you never want to go through like the UK with a gun. It's like you sort of know there's places that it's like a little bit easier logistically, even if it's a longer flight, just to be like, okay, it's not going to be a problem if you do it this way. If you do it a different way, it's a problem. But so that was awesome. And just, a great adventure in like, I have to imagine basically as remote as you could ever be anywhere in this world at this point. This weekend I'm going up to Oregon, just a quick sort of, Columbia whitetail. And it's sort of an interesting, there's like a pocket of whitetail in there. And a buddy was going up to do a Roosevelt elk, bow hunt. He was like, hey man, my friend's up here. They got a tag for this. Like, it's kind of unique. You want to just come up and spend the weekend? Cause I've just, right now going into midterms, it's sort of insane. So my schedule's nuts, but it's like, I'm the guy that'll, I may do a hunt. If I draw a tag, I'll go. But I may be like, I got 2 days, and if I eat tag soup, that's fine. But I'm going to go and do the adventure. Have some sort of later season elk stuff.
Where are you going elk hunting this year?
Tag in Colorado.
Okay.
So I'll go do that. A little bit later in the fall, and then sort of have a late season mountain goat hunt up in Alaska. which will be really cool. You know, buddy outfitter of mine up there that I've done, you know, a bunch of hunting with. You know, at SCI, we auctioned off this hunt. Like, you come with me, and we raised a lot of money for conservation and stuff like that. And, you know, we'll do that hunt, like living on, you know, sort of fishing boat trawler for the week and like going, you know, off of base camps and hunting the glaciers up there, a late season mountain goat hunt. And, you know, maybe depending on what's going on with the weather, you know, maybe some Sitka deer. You know, so yeah, no, I always keep pretty busy with that stuff.
What's your favorite hunt?
All right, so my favorite stuff, like I like the ones where you work for it. Like, you know, drop me off in the Yukon with a backpack and rifle and like pick me up in 14 days, like chasing sheep. You know, no base camp, living out of your pack, carrying everything that you want with you. Like, honestly, it's more like endurance race than it is even hunting. You know, you may see no legal sheep, you know, or, you know, in a 10-day type of hunt. It's not, but like, I love that stuff. It's just, you know, such an awesome challenge and like, you know, good way to lose some weight, come out every, you know, have 10, 14 days, literally, you lose 15, 20 pounds because you're just, you know, you're so far north, it's light till midnight, you're hunting 16, 17 hours straight, you know, like it's just awesome.
Archery or rifle?
That stuff, I still do more rifle. I do a lot of archery, sort of local, especially because of sort of just the way my time requirements work. It's like, I do a lot of hunts and everyone's like, you're always hunting. It's like, yeah, but I may only do, it's like, I'll come in on, you know, Thursday night late and I'm on a red eye back to the office, you know, late Sunday night. Like, you know, I'll go. And again, I'm totally comfortable eating tag soup. I've done that even with an archery hunt where it's like, I got 2 days to do an archery tag and I've actually pulled it off a couple times. And like, but you know, if I'm going up that far, working that hard, it's like, you know, not 100% there trying to do the, you know, and I've tried doing both where it's like, you know, strap the bow onto the pack with the rifle and just, you know, you know, then the opportunity, like, yep, rifle look.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, I'm not, and I do a lot of archery hunting, but it ends up being a lot of like my local stuff. And, you know, I love doing, I shoot bow all the time and just even, you know, go up to my, you know, farm and, you know, hunt doe with a trad bow. And you know, that's just as much of a fun and challenge as anything. So I do a lot of that, but like the travel stuff tends to probably lean more towards the rifle.
Well, you know, the way that I look at it is like, people ask me this question. It's like, you know, what do you like to hunt with? And I'm like, well, technically, like I like to kill, right? Where, you know, what I like to shoot is I like to shoot my trad bow because it's the hardest thing to shoot. Yeah. But I'm not a great trad marksman past, you know, like we were talking about 40 yards, right?
Yeah.
So,
by the way, most aren't.
Most people aren't. And I like to, you know, get the animal on the ground. And I've been trying to really focus on how do I learn how to hunt, become a better hunter so I can close the gap and make sure that I'm always within, you know, that 20-yard circle. And rifle is just the easy button for me, right?
Yeah.
Like I go to the,
but also where you live, it's also harder if you be a trad hunter. Like, you know, I've won my local, anytime I've competed in it, I haven't lost it, like my local, you know, trad, you know, club championship sort of thing. Like, you know, I can shoot a trad bow reasonably well for a guy that, you know, doesn't sit there and shoot hours a day, you know, with it. But like, if I lived out west, it's like, you know, your shots are just further, right? Like I can, you know, back home when I was living in New York or, you know, or Florida, if I'm pig hunting, like I can set up a tree stand, I can get there, I can usually get within 15 to 20 yards and that kind of hunting. Like out here, that's just a lot harder to do. You have to start shooting 40 yards and all of a sudden that's just an entirely different dynamic, 40 yards and honestly, and out. So it just depends what it is. So like, I wouldn't even think about like bringing the trad bow out here, even if I can, because I'm just, I'm not comfortable enough, like being like, I'm always going to eat tag soup because I'm never, you know, I may get lucky one time. Like, and it's sort of refreshing, actually. It's sort of like why like we started Field Ethos. Like even hunting has sort of gone woke, which is like, you know, I only hunt for the meat. I'm like, no, you don't. Like, come on, you know, I've saved the hoof to carve a chest piece out of. Like, nah, I like to hunt. I love the hunting. The meat is always used. It's great. I'm not going to tell you that I like elk more than I like steak. Like, it's not true. It doesn't mean I don't like it. Doesn't mean I don't eat it. Doesn't mean you know, with as much as I do, like, oftentimes I'll go to a place, there's like, here's $400 for processing. You guys know a family that could use this? Sure. Because like by the time I'm done, you know, processing, shipping, you know, 400 pounds of elk meat back home, it's like, I could have had the finest steak in the world. And like, I'm not saving money by hunting, like, you know, yada, yada, yada. You know, even hunting in these days has sort of taken that like, well, you know, I'm apologetic and we got to justify everything. And like, so we started Field Ethos, which, you know, just to literally be like, hey, we got to have some humor these days. We got to be able to joke about these things. Like, the guys that started representing hunting, I sort of felt were like, dude, I've been in a lot of camps all over the world. Like, I've never met those people. It doesn't mean, it's great to have outreach to different groups of hunting. I think I welcome that and everything like that. But it's like, they were like, that's what hunter is. I don't know. Like, no one's speaking to the guys like me. And I feel like the guys like me are probably the vast majority, but so many, again, have been beaten into that we must justify everything and we must apologize for doing these things. And you can't like hunting. You're just doing it for the meat. I'm like, bullshit. Like, stop. Just stop. And it was just a shame to see that even happening in hunting. Like, we started Field Ethos because it was literally like, it was Jason, former game warden, another buddy who was a, former SEAL sniper, another friend that was like, just all these different walks of life. And we were literally sitting there in a text thread, like talking shit about like the people who are supposedly representing hunters today. And it was like, someone was like, we got to like put this down for it because it's actually pretty funny. And it's like, this is the real campfire conversation that happens in hunting camp that like no one's talking about anymore. And, it sort of just took off because people were like, wow, we love the sort of unapologetic attitude. We love that you'll poke fun of these things. Like, you don't have to sit there and just constantly justify what you're doing. Like, you can just like doing it. Yeah. And that's okay.
Well, I think that, the past several years where I've become more immersed into the hunting subculture, I didn't realize that there were so many different subcultures of hunters as well. So you have like the traditional, the trad guys that are like, this is, it's more spiritual or whatever it is that they're doing. And it's fine.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey man,
totally fine.
You're going to use all the pieces of it. You're going to do all that you're really into. You're going to pray over the animal or whatever it is that you do. Go, you do you. I'm totally fine with anything you want to do. It's the social media image where you're representing the fact like this is some kind of spiritual journey, but really you're just like
doing it for likes, like follow XYZ company.
Like,
and beyond that, what I sometimes had a bigger problem with, and I sort of figured it out, was like, the trad guys hate the compound guys. The compound guys hate the crossbow guys. I'm like, hey guys, like, how about this? Like, we probably agree on like 99% of stuff. Like, why don't we have enough enemies? Like, we have enough like people that like hate hunting, and like they're not just going after like, your AR-15. Like, if you think that deer season isn't on the table further down the line for these guys, like they're like, well, I don't need a hunt in Africa. I was like, well, listen, I could show you stats where I sort of made a name in hunting was like someone leaked pictures of me in Africa hunting, and there was outrage cycle, and I was on the cover of every newspaper for like they're poaching, and I'm like, poaching in Zimbabwe, like in the Matetse, like I don't think so, and you could show them, here's licenses, here's this, but like, they're so used to the other side is they're going to browbeat you into a submission and an apology. And like, I'm so sorry, I'll never do that again. I sort of took the opposite approach. I was a guy from New York City. No one knew I even hunted. And it was like, no, here's the facts about conservation. Here's what hunting did in some of these markets. Look what happens in, sub-Saharan Africa when they've shut down hunting. Poaching becomes rampant because all of a sudden, the elephant that you in New York City may think is a beautiful, majestic creature, when a herd goes through and destroys a family's crop that is their livelihood, they're not going to take it so well. When a lion is eating the cattle that they, guess what? Like, they take the dead carcass, they pour lye over it, they'll kill the whole pride. Like, they don't look at it the way we do. And, Ivan Carter, sort of the great conservationist and hunter out there, like, he had this saying, like, you can't solve third world problems with first world solutions.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you've seen, so much of that. They just don't understand how it actually works. And so I took that opposite approach, which was like, I just started fighting back with like facts. And it was like, So I made a lot of friends in the hunting world that I would have never been like, thank you for just taking that approach, because we're so used to people just, no different than sort of the Republicans that we were talking about, which is like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, this, please don't attack me. Leave me alone.
Don't attack me. It's Western hubris where, I worked in Botswana where we were training counter poaching guys in Okavango, and you can't have a conversation with a portion of the United States about what's actually happening without them making these really drastic assumptions.
Yeah, the Disney model of wildlife.
It's wild, and so you just stop having the conversation after a while. It's like, hey, this is a majestic, animal. I can't believe what
it is until it eats your children. Exactly. I've been, I've come across like a foot,
right,
like a human foot in Africa, like still attacking because like. When you're walking from the village in a floodplain area, you got a 5-mile walk through the high grass. This was in the Kilimanjaro up in Tanzania. Like you get hit by a lion, your family gets hit by a lion. All of a sudden, They may be majestic, but if they're not generating income from the hunters who are, tipping them more than they would make in any, in a 2-week hunt, they're getting more income than they would in a year of raising cattle or doing crops. Like, people can't fathom that. They're like, oh, well, that's nonsense. It's like, it's fact. If those animals have value to them that way, they'll preserve them.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't,
it's gone.
It's gone. You literally cannot. I've tried doing it, and I had friends that are sort of even like, why would you go? I was like, do you understand this? And even guys like that are probably more politically aligned with me, like that, still couldn't, because they're just. It's been so ingrained in our society. That's terrible. Like, again, sort of the Disney animals have families model. Like, you haven't spent enough time in nature if you think that it's a nice and friendly place. Like, it's about as vicious as it gets.
Any time in nature, if you
zero,
think it's like I've had to explain that even from elk hunting, because people will talk about elk hunting and they're like, oh, it's just it's a beautiful animal. I'm like, it is. It's beautiful and it's very tasty. Yeah. It's
incredible challenge, and it's fun, and it's like.
They'll break pieces of their antlers off in them and they'll die of sepsis. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
And then they're going to get their ass, they're going to be dragging their ass end if something happens. They're going to get eaten from the rear end from a coyote or a wolf or a bear or anything like this. And it's like, you guys need to watch more nature documentaries to see exactly what this is. Because what I do is typically, and every elk so far, knock on wood, it's one arrow. Yeah. They're dead in less than 10 minutes.
It's a much better death probably than anything they'd ever be dealt in actual nature. Like, nothing dies of old age in nature for the most part.
It's not as if it's some kind of cartoon character where people are just like living and they're singing and birds are flying around their antlers and they're friends with the bear, they're friends with the bear.
The deer fawn loves the bear. Who wouldn't love the grizzly bear?
On top of the bear when it's hibernating.
They're cuddling, and it's like
you guys are idiots. There's no context to this
nothing
whatsoever.
At all. It's like,
It's so juvenile, their concept. They're like, well, I don't understand. Bear hunting is a whole other thing.
Yeah. It's
like when you talk about bear hunting and then people get
bears, the cats.
Tunes. Yeah.
I do it. I could never post it's just like you can't even they're like, I'll be on the hunt. I'll go do my thing. But you don't even take a photo.
I purposely posted that picture of my brown bear a week before we went public, just as a fuck. Because it's you're even explaining it to people. It's like, I can't believe you would do that. That's a teddy bear. And I'm like, you realize that is the bear that I killed out there is a 10-foot 4-inch bear. It's a big bear, massive bear. It was also eating cubs to put.
Well, or eating the cubs to put the sow back in heat because he wants some action.
Exactly.
This is how it works. And they're like, no way, that doesn't happen. I'm like, yeah.
They're eating other bears and cubs. Like, the first time you see, a big boar eat a couple cubs, let's come back to me after that. You know what I mean? Then you can say, what I'm doing is it's unethical. Watch them play with a cub carcass as it's a beach ball in front of the mother.
Yeah.
And then say, that's like
foreplay for the, you know what I mean? That's foreplay.
This is, you guys have no concept. Or watch, wolves chase an elk,
a sheep, a moose, and just
whatever it is, and
eat it alive in the swamp.
Eat it alive, and tell me that a bullet, traveling X mile,
at 3,000 feet per second is
hitting it like a freight train and taking its heart out or its double lungs out like this is better than being chased down and eaten alive by a pack of dogs.
Yes.
No, it's not. But that's beautiful. Yes. That's beautiful. It's like, I've seen
I've seen the videos.
It.
I mean, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
I don't know if I'd go as far as to say beautiful. It's about as gruesome as it gets.
Gruesome. It's gruesome.
And we're just so far detached from that. You know what I mean? That's why I try to make sure I get my kids out there so they just get it. And I've had that issue. Like, when we were still living in New York, it's like, one of my sons, is hunted with me from he was the kid that 3 years old, Dad, take me hunting. He couldn't even say the H, yet. He just wanted to go, and he just sort of had whatever I had, for that. And, he had been with me all over the world at this point. At a very young age, I just sort of took the chance. You got to hunting's not the easiest thing to get into. You sort of need that mentor. So it's like, hey, you gotta risk some of your own personal enjoyment, to make sure that's around for the next generation. And like, we came back after one thing and I was like, hey, buddy, I'd got him a tag for something else. Right. And, he'd gone back to school to New York and I think he had a blast on this trip that we did, that annual summer trip. And like, it comes back and I was like, hey man, I got you, Dad, I don't really want to go hunting. Now he still loved shooting and everything. I'm like, wait, what's going on? Like, and like he started with like the Disney sound bites, like the teachers in school or the kids like like he was all proud of like what he had done with me in the summer. And they're like, animals have families. And he's like sitting there like getting like they're literally indoctrinating him with this bullshit in these schools. Like, I lost him for like a year of like, he'd still go shooting with me all the time. Like, but like, and I was like, I know, like, because I just know what he had done and I know what he'd been able to, like, he went on some like real hunt, like hunts that you wouldn't usually take like a 7, 8, 9-year-old on, like, because, and he was always a rock star. And I'm sitting there being like, what the hell just happened? Now, we moved to Florida. He gets around some normal people that they're not feeding him this bullshit. And he's like, hey man, when are we going hunting again? I'm like, wait, what? Right. What just happened? But there was that whole like sort of peer pressure set, just depending on where you were, and then indoctrination of our children, and it's going on everywhere.
Yeah, and that's why we collectively, I think as hunters, and you and I were talking about this concept last night, where we could come up with the ultimate competition that's super fun, that allows all of us to participate in a way where it's like, here's my trad bow, here's my compound bow, here's my competitive rifle shooters. Well, how do we put something together that encourages sportsmen of the future? So, kids can come out and shoot their, rimfire 22s. Yeah. They can learn how to hunt, because to your point, it's really fucking difficult to find a good hunting mentor. I mean, I'm able to do it because
you got buddies that are
buddies. Yeah. And I grew up hunting, but I had to come back to it later in life after being a tactician. I actually didn't understand how to hunt. I knew how to shoot. I didn't know how to hunt.
A lot of people don't make that distinction, that are two very different worlds. You know what I mean? Like, and no, it's really important. And it is hard. Like for me, I was sort of blessed. I think, my grandfather sort of got me into the woods, but he, lived in communist Czechoslovakia. Took me there in the summer. So like, there's the woods. Like, couldn't hunt, couldn't do those things because you weren't, the elite. He was a blue collar electrician, right? But like, that got me into it. And I was sort of blessed along the way to have a couple people and like pick me up and even teach me the basics or take me out. As I got a little bit older, I think, candidly, my name probably got me in the door a lot of places. And they're like, then it's like, oh, he's not an asshole. Like, then you get invited back. So, I had a lot of those opportunities, but like, I think even our parents' generation, they did a really bad job with that. Hunting camp was for the guys, and they're, half of it was, we're going to go have cigars and drink, and we don't want to be bothered with the children. So I feel like we had like almost like it, probably less so out here in the West, but it's still a problem where you had this sort of education gap where like kids didn't get into it young enough. Then you try, by the time they were old enough to get into hunting, now everyone's a one sport specialist at the age of 3, and they just don't have the time for it. And so, I think we do have to make like great, effort to just, get that next generation into it. Don't make it all about ourselves, be that mentor. And like for me now, when I, taking a young kid out or someone that's new or, a woman out or whatever it is, like I have as much fun like getting them something than I ever do behind the trigger myself at this point.
No, same. Like I know that if I take my daughters hunting, turkey hunting, I take them out all, like, especially if we're in Texas over the winter, we'll put on night vision goggles and their suppressed 22s and go out with lasers and hunt coyotes. Like, I know it's going to be more work.
Yeah.
Like if we're sitting in the blind, we're turkey hunting, I know that she's going to be coloring in about 15 minutes, right? But
okay.
She's in the field. Like, we're in the field together.
You do that a lot with your employees. I mean, I hear all the stories about, hey, you gave up your tag to give it to XYZ person in the company and got them out on their, like, that's awesome.
You got to like getting people out in the field and getting them like very active, and then being able to not only carry on that tradition to the other people and then spreading it out through our peer group.
Yeah.
I talk to people all the time where I'm like, well, if I can't take my kids, I'm not going to, I'm out.
Yeah.
Like, or if it's my hunt, like I'm taking my wife, right? This is her first.
That's great. Yeah, that sounds like a cool one.
Her first elk season. And my wife's way into it. She just started shooting her bow a couple of years ago. She's way into this. Well, now my daughters are going to be into this.
Yeah.
Like
we do have to like,
hunting.
If you get mama bear into it, baby bear's going to get into it. And like, that's the reality of like the world. And that's another thing we did a lousy job of. I think actually archery has probably done a much better job of sort of nurturing sort of, getting women into the game. I think it's probably a little less intimidating than a gun. And like, you've been to the ranges, like, the old stodgy dude at the gun range knows everything but knows nothing. And like, sort of everyone's talking down on you. They can't just teach you right. Like, the culture needs a lot to be desired.
They look like a lot of these guys in the gun ranges, they look like mall security, right? And they're like know-it-all. Yeah. Like to your point, they know everything, but actually they know nothing. Yeah. They look like, they're wearing like 5'11" pants and their belt is like a
size 76 waist. It's like, you're really tactical.
Well, let me show you what the best thing is here. And you're like, dude, no. But I agree. I think with archery, it's gotten more people into the sport of hunting. And I think, Joe has done a great job, I think, of beating the drum for archery for the last several years. Guys like Cam and guys like John, all these guys have done a fucking phenomenal job.
I agree.
And to your point, archery's less intimidating. It's quiet.
Yeah.
It's
well, you can do it in your backyard too. You know what I mean? Like I know guys live on, small lawns. They still have a target up against their fence and, you're shooting in a residential neighborhood. It's a little harder to do with a rifle, that was my back. I do, a lot of archery as well, but like, my background sort of was like competitive, like long range shooting and stuff like that. That's what I did. And so it's even funny for me going to some of these places and it's like, these guys that don't know anything about this stuff, and I've probably forgotten more about it than most. But because of who I am, they're like, well, he doesn't know anything. He's just another one of these guys. It's like, it's like if it turns me off, like it's definitely turning off a newbie that doesn't even have a base of knowledge to begin with.
Well, the range, like that's the thing is like I hardly ever go to ranges unless it's like Ready Gunner or these other places that I really love.
I go. I'm blessed to be able to go to like private places where I can do my thing and not have to deal with that. Unfortunately,
shoot on my own property, or I've taught all my kids how to shoot. They've got 22s, or all my kids. I got 2, and I can do that. And I'm super fortunate, just like you. I can shoot in my backyard with my bow. I can take my kids out and shoot their 22s. I can do all of that. But for the average person, that is trying to have an introduction into hunting and firearms, like they have to search around. They have to find the right place to dovetail into this.
And you have a bad first experience that sort of turns you off. And what's really interesting about it, like, I used to do this and even younger, like I've never taken like a woman to the range that wasn't like, and where I was from, like everyone was a skeptic on guns. It's like, what do you mean? I was like, give me an hour.
Right.
What do you mean? It's like, you trust me enough to be like, show up for an hour. Like, not one person like, that was awesome. Like, when are we doing that again? Like, if you take the time and do it right, you can turn like literally an anti-gunner into someone who's like, they may never be buying, but they're like, okay, I get it. Like you in an hour, you could turn someone who's literally an enemy because they just didn't understand into like, not.
Yes.
And like, I've done it so many times. Again, where I was from, everyone was against guns in New York City. It was like, okay, come on. Like, we're going to go shoot some pistol, shoot some rifle, we'll shoot an AR-15. Like, oh my God, are you sure? Like, that can blow a hole this big into someone. I'm like, well, here's some facts. Like, shoot some clays. Like, literally, they're like, please, can we do that again?
Right.
Like,
it's just fun.
People that 5 minutes ago would have been like, you don't deserve, you don't have the right to have an AR-15. Why do you need a handgun? Why would you need anything? Like, now they're like, yeah, we got to do that again. I want to get a shotgun and take some lessons. And like, it's incredible, but you got to make the effort.
Well, I think if we team up, when we team up and we say, this is the competition where we lay out multiple different stages, where we were talking about it last night till like midnight. It was awesome.
Dude, I lost sleep about this one because I was like, my brain was going, I was like, we can make this the coolest like invitational ever and then use it as a way to jumpstart the rest of that conversation. But that's going to be awesome.
So we talked about this and we were talking about, okay, this is invitation only. And then we grow it out of what we're talking about is like 150 guys initially, where we have different stages that are sponsored by different companies, but they're also emphasizing different skills. So we have, the archery, we have PRS, we have pistol, and then we have different companies that are sponsoring different events. Then we'll have like these different tents for vendors with, barbecue and a fucking concert and then a big purse prize. So,
so you can win your discipline and still make it worthwhile. And you can also have like, be winning your discipline, but all of a sudden, like you're losing like the skeet shooting with a .410 handgun.
Yeah.
Like
You're fucked.
We're like the ultimate haze.
And then you switch it up. So you're like, okay, well, you have the PRS guys are killing it.
Yeah.
Long range PRS guys are just like thrashing everybody. And then they get to the tomahawk throwing station. And they miss. Or they get to the skeet, to your point, like they get to the skeet station and then they're like, oh man, I can't do this or whatever it might be. You guys were talking about the Campfire Club. Was it Campfire Club?
Yeah.
Where you have all these different.
Yeah, there's like 100, 25-year-old competition founded by Roosevelt, a club. Like that's where those guys went to go play,
right?
A long time ago. And it was sort of this test every, twice a year, and it's 20 events, all sorts of, 5 shotgun events, 3 rifle events, 3 pistol events, fly fishing, bait casting, canoes, like get a log, a match, and you got to bring a thing to a water thing to a boil in a certain amount,
Right.
So tested like all those skills, and these great outdoorsmen that sort of founded sort of, the American, conservation model. And we're like, they did this stuff for, I don't know. So it was like, today it's probably a little different because, you got to throw archery in there. You got to, different kind of, that you wouldn't have, like, why would you kill something with a bow 150 years ago? You wouldn't, that's not the best way to do it. It was a little different. Today you can do that. But, creating this event, sort of testing all around sort of, outdoor skills and just making it a, one big party, I think would be like an awesome way to do it. Because again, everyone, even these that become so specialized that like you could be the greatest in this and like not have any, like you guys, you've seen it, like sort of you put the guys that are, great snipers, you put them on a skeet range and all of a sudden it's like, one of the greatest shooters in the world is like,
they'll be like, they'll just fall apart.
Yeah. It's always, it's always fun. So we'll have some fun putting that together. Like I'm really like that. It's like the one weekend I'm looking forward to next year. I don't even know when it is.
I don't know when it is. I know that we're going to do it. We kind of narrowed down. We're like, okay, we're going to do it in July. We don't exactly know where it's going to be or who we're going to invite, but we do know we're going to do it.
Yes.
And
it's going to be awesome.
It's going to be amazing. It's going to be Field Ethos, Black Rifle Coffee, all these different.
Yeah, and all the guys that we know at this point, like it is a cool community once you get to a certain level. Like, there's not one of the CEOs of these companies that be like, hey, come on, you're participating. We're gonna make it cool. We'll come up with a good charitable component. We'll make sure.
Yeah.
I watch some. The guys. I shoot a lot with like a bunch of the top PRS guys, and it's like, it's amazing because it's. They're traveling to maybe win like $1,500. I'm like, yeah, but dude, like your weekend just cost you like $3,000, and like it's.
You're right.
They're so dedicated to the sport, and it's really cool to see. It'd be like it'd be cool to have just like. Even if there's some joking stuff, just to have like a fuck you purse,
right?
In there, be like, hey, you come up to this one and you win like this is going to be the biggest match of the year, even still, and then we're going to match it to a charity of your choice, and like I don't know. There's so much we can do with it just to have a blast.
Well, it's going to be amazing because you know the Alpha Munitions guys, both you and Eric both. It's funny because we talked about this a while ago where I walked into. My neighbor is Tom. He owns Alpha Munitions. I walked into the living room and he was talking to Eric on the phone about it was like diameters or whatever it was.
Like my brother's almost bigger. Like when I'm hunting and fishing, like my brother like literally has a machine shop. He builds his own like precision rifles. Like he's a nerd in that stuff, and it's like it's just what it's what we do at that world. So it's a.
Well, and all these guys are nerds. Like for me, I'm a coffee nerd, but I'm a shooting nerd. Like I like precision. So things about weights and measures and time and temperatures and all these things. So this stuff is hyper interesting. And then as we start to put all these pieces together with guys like, Field Ethos, Black Rifle Coffee and Alpha Munitions and Leupold, we know is like 100% in or SIG. All these guys are going to be able to geek out on this. And we're going to have a fucking ton of fun. It's going to be amazing.
It's going to be awesome. Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
Dude, I got to get to you. I got to get you to the airport. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure, buddy. Good to be with you.
You got any passing thoughts? You got any closing statements?
No, that was fun. I think, but I look forward. I'm actually really psyched about putting this thing together. So I imagine we'll have plenty to talk about again and doing this, but like, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
Good to be out here.